Oh, wait, no, not yet. Hold on. Good morning and welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Strategy Show. I'm Dave Loughran, Lafayette_D on Twitter, joined by Adam Scherer, Ship My Money DFS. Two slates. Got 4 games coming in hot because we got only a couple hours. 12:20 lock. We'll hit those first and we'll make sure we do it quick to get you guys in good shape. Then we'll hit on the 8-game main slate as well for tonight. And of course, you get deeper dive live before lock. They'll take you all the way up to lock later in the day. But before anything, hit that thumbs up, show us some love, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below if you're watching or listening after the fact. And if you're in podcast form, hey, or if you're not, know that you can be, whether it's Apple Podcasts, whether it's Spotify, whatever it may be, whatever, pick your poison. We're out there. Leave a rating, review, subscribe to the pod, show us some love over there as well. What's going on, dude?
Yeah, nice split slate today. I'm looking forward to it. I like when we get the 4 or 5 game early slate.
Yeah, you like the 12 p.m. slates too? Just start it as early as possible.
Kind of like I prefer one just because it gives me more time after the show. But
All right, well, let's do this. Spare that. We're almost at 50 likes out of the gate. I mean, you guys just been killing it. I shouldn't even have to ask anymore. We're gonna spare the pleasantries because I want to make sure that people have more than enough time to get it done. Like we're 2 hours from early lock, then we can take our time on this main slate, but make sure we get in as much good information as possible. So you've got the Angels and Atlanta, and as always, happy that you guys are with us. Hopefully, you're having a good morning. Atlanta at home against the Angels. They're semi-sizable favorites here. The thing here is it's a 10.5 total. It continues to be hot in Atlanta. Maybe it won't be as hot being that it's 12:20 in the afternoon on the East Coast. But with a total this high where you've got Yanni Chirinos and Lucas Giolito for the now part of the Angels, and what's the 83 degrees at first pitch. What do we do with pitching here on a game like this with a 10.5 total, but also only 4 games on this early slate?
right, yeah, only 4 games on the early slate, so that makes it tricky. Obviously, the better pitcher here has the more difficult matchup. Giolito 10-1 against the Braves is a really tough sell, just given how good the Braves are. Giolito is a good pitcher in his own right, but we know how dangerous that Atlanta offense is. Overall this season, 4.3 xFIP for Giolito, but about a 26% strikeout percentage. More issues with left-handed power than right-handed power. On the other side, Chirinos not very good either, and not in an easy matchup against the Angels either. So even on a 4-game slate, I think it's pretty tough to get a lot of this game. Or these pitchers rather. You do still have some other quality pitching options. You have Eduardo Rodriguez, who's actually, who's legitimately good facing the Pirates. You have a pitcher facing the Tigers. You have Mackenzie Gore on the slate in a decent spot. You have Tanner Bybee on the slate. So it's not like this slate is completely, void of pitching, but with it being a 4-gamer, maybe you get some Giolito, maybe you get a little bit of 6,700 Chirinos, but it's still really hard to make a case for either one.
Now with hitters though, a little bit different. I mean, Atlanta's got a sizable run total today, and it's not like Atlanta isn't sporting a decent implied total either. These two spots in a pretty favorable park, pretty favorable hitting weather as well. Giolito is not a bad pitcher. I'm not sure what to make of Chirinos right now, but when it comes to the Atlanta bats, you're going to have to pay for them. You always do. You're never going to get good value there. Oftentimes they show up at the top of the top stacks tool and top stack probability and the bottom of the top stacks tool for value. I guess the best way to do this, instead of just asking you if you like them, would be, is it going to be easier to get to them today, given that, Giolito's 10,100, then you've got Eduardo Rodriguez at 9,500, Tanner Bybee at 8,700. There's no Spencer Strider on this slate. There's no 11, 12K pitchers or even 10K pitchers that you're going to love.
Yeah, so that makes it a little bit easier, but the counter to that is that you don't have as many value pitchers just because you only have 8 pitchers going, and any of the pitchers that you actually are going to want to roster are relatively expensive. There are some cheap guys you can roll the dice on like Blanco or Miley, but that, and also there's not as many offenses, so you don't have as many cheap mini stacks you can pair with them. So it's still likely to be pretty difficult. They are a little bit cheaper than usual because once again, you have Travis d'Arnaud at catcher instead of Sean Murphy. So he's 4,700 instead of, 5,500 to 6K, whatever Murphy would be. The bottom of the order is not outrageous, but they're still not cheap. Least expensive guy in the lineup, Rosario at 3,900. So they are still difficult to get to, but where you can, certainly would like to. I'll be interested to see how the ownership shows up because they are clearly the best offense on this slate, and there's not many that even compete with them. Like the Angels have Ohtani, so they're automatically good. The Astros are obviously good, but like the Guardians aren't anything special. The Mets suck. The Brewers aren't good for the most part. Pirates are average. Tigers suck. So the gap between the Braves and most of the slate is just bigger than it normally is as well.
Man, how about poor Ben Lively just getting hung out to
I didn't see
die.
what his stat line ended up being. I do know what the Cubs did.
4 innings, 13 runs.
Ooh.
13 runs and earned runs. in 4 innings, 4 home runs for Ben Lively.
That's rough. I'm sure Reds fans are having a blast because I saw like with the trade deadline yesterday, I saw a decent amount of, oh, the Reds aren't doing anything, like blah, 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 blah. And then the response to not adding any pitching has been Lively giving up 13 earned runs.
And it just got absolutely torched in that game. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. It was terrible for them. But I think it was actually, and you could go back and look. Dude, I think it was 5 runs in the first, 3 runs in the second, 3 runs in the third, 3 runs in the fourth. Just every single inning was disastrous for him.
Yeah, I knew it was one of those games where like they just were consistently scoring. Like I saw, they had 7 runs through 2 or whatever, and I was like, shit, I don't have enough Cubs. And then, but it's like, okay, well, maybe they'll just, die out. I saw like I had one lineup. There was like a San Diego stack with Bellinger and Talkman. So I was like, oh, well, this could end up being good. And then I look again and they have like 12 runs. And then they have like 16 runs. I was like, okay, well, you just need all of the Cubs at this point because they're not stopping.
Chris Williams said Ben Lively on DraftKings had minus 22.6.
Well, that's not great.
That's incredible. Woo. All right. You talked about Angels bats here too with Ohtani, but do you think, and like you said, ownership should be updated any minute now for this early slate, but among the 8 teams going, and let me see if we have a line. We didn't like 20 minutes ago for this Houston game. We still don't, because we're still waiting on a pitcher for the Astros. But when you look at these 4 games, where would you rank the bats, the stacks for not just Atlanta, but for the Angels as well across the rest of this slate?
Hang on. Oh, I guess this is, never mind. I thought we had updated ownership because I saw for early slate, I saw Shohei Ohtani, but it's from a previous early slate, so it threw me off. And I missed your question because I was trying to figure it out.
I'm saying, yeah, where obviously we know Atlanta is going to be up top as far as just like top stack probability, the likelihood that they're a top stack. Where would you rank Atlanta across the rest of this slate right now, given that, and you pointed it out.
Atlanta or the Angels?
The Angels, sorry. Like you have Detroit and Pittsburgh, Washington offense, Milwaukee, whatever, Cleveland. We don't know who they're going up against. Houston. I mean, LA's got to be towards the top as well.
I assume they're second to Atlanta.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, in terms of talent, they are one of the best offenses on the slate. They have one of the best matchups against Chirinos. And I mean, you look at implied run totals. Like you said, we don't have a line on the Houston-Cleveland game, but I assume Houston's not going to have like a 5-run implied total against Tanner Bybee. Milwaukee's lower than the Angels. So is Washington. So are Pittsburgh and Detroit. And, the Angels are still a good offense. We don't know exactly what the lineup will look like today, but you assume Shohei Ohtani is going to be in it, which makes him fantastic as always. Yanni Chirinos, so far this year against lefties, 479 pitches thrown, 10.5% strikeout percentage, 224 expected ISO, 374 expected WOBA. Righties have been fine too, 197 expected ISO, 370 expected WOBA. Ohtani's always going to look great, but you have a cheap Moustakas. Moniak's having a solid season. He's priced up, but he's been good. Rengifo is a cheap leadoff bat, so plenty of value there. You have CJ Cron in this lineup now, who was like one of 2 good hitters on the Rockies. Now he's here. Renfroe has power. Grichuk at least has some power. He hasn't been great offensively, but it's a pretty deep lineup with the one stud Ohtani in it as well. So they look good, and they're certainly a lot easier to get to than the Braves are.
Let's talk about Eduardo Rodriguez and Osvaldo Bido. What's going on with Rodriguez with not wanting to, with the no trade clause and not wanting to go to the Dodgers?
He wanted to either go to San Diego or stay on the East Coast to be closer to family.
Okay. But okay. It's just, I mean, maybe the first time anyone has said, I don't want to go to LA, let me stay in Detroit.
Yeah. Well, so the thing to me is like, did the Tigers just never talk to the guy that they were definitely planning on trading and that was going to get them the biggest return? And like, because like him blocking the trade came out like 30 minutes before the deadline. And then not long after that, it came out that he told the Dodgers he was willing to play for Boston, Baltimore, or the Padres. And that's it. But like, how did you not find this out until 10 minutes before the deadline?
Right. And what's the difference between the Padres and the Dodgers as far as location?
I don't know unless like he has friends on the team. I don't know I don't know what relationships he has. But the other 2 teams were the team that drafted him and the team he played for already.
Right. Yeah, no, look, don't get me wrong. I can see why he'd want to go there. The one that hung me up a little bit was wanting to go to San Diego, but not the
Right.
Dodgers. Like, but maybe you don't want to go to California. You don't want to play with the Dodgers.
Right.
You know, maybe you don't like their politics. That's probably what it was. No,
But
I'm kidding. But
no,
then
no. Yeah.
why? What?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, I'm with you as far as like if you want to stay on the East Coast, you want to stay on the East Coast. But I'm guessing he has good relationships with somebody on the Padres.
Do you like him today against the Pirates at PNC Park?
Yeah, looks good. He's a good pitcher. I was texting with somebody yesterday. I said I think he's one of the more underrated pitchers in baseball because he had the health issues coming out of the COVID season and just basically had like a lost year when he returned from that. But he's back to being a good pitcher. And this guy still isn't old. He's like 30, 31. So far this year, he's striking out about 26% of hitters, 3.6 xFIP, 3.17 FIP, less than a home run per nine. I mean, he's a really good pitcher. And I think people kind of sleep on it because he had that lost year. Then he's pitching for the Tigers, and like, who gives a shit? But you're in a good park. It's a good enough matchup. Pirates do look like they are expecting to have Hayes back today, but it's going to be a very right-handed heavy lineup, probably entirely right-handed. But that's not really a big issue for Rodriguez. 26% K percentage to righties, 157 expected ISO, 308 expected WOBA. Obviously, you'd prefer there be lefties in there because he's been almost unhittable against lefties. But he looks good here at 9,500. Price tag's reasonable. I like him quite a bit.
Yeah, can pitch pretty deep in the games. I know he's had a couple odd starts, but the strikeout rate to me is what's surprising. Is his K rate up this year? It's got to be 26%. All right. I mean, last year he made 17 starts and had an 18.4% K rate, but that was more an outlier than anything else across his other seasons. Yeah.
Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he had myocarditis in 2020 and then came back in 21 and was good, and then 2022, I don't remember what his deal was, but like he just wasn't good, but then he's back to normal.
What do you make of the other side with Osvaldo Bido? Is there like, okay, normally on a bigger slate, you go, yeah, I'm not really all that interested. He is 5,500. This is not somebody that's racking up strikeouts at an electric rate, but it is against the Detroit Tigers. I mean, is doing here at close to the bottom of the salary. I mean, he's got what, 20% strikeout rate this year and a 504 xFIP. So those aren't, overwhelmingly encouraging numbers, but he is super cheap. It is a good park and it is a favorable matchup.
Yeah, given the slate, he's fine. We have him projected for about 10.5 DraftKings points. He's 5,500. Most slates, that's not really getting you a second look, but the Tigers do only have a 4.4 implied run total. And pitching on this slate, it's not bad, but it's still only a 4-game slate. And, you do have Giolito, who's pretty expensive in a tough spot. Rodriguez looks good. It's not like you have any like true clear-cut guy you have to be getting a lot of. So using him a little bit as a value guy makes some sense. I will be curious to see where his ownership comes in, because it's certainly not the kind of play where I want to be going to him if 25% of the field has the same idea or something. But assuming he's relatively low owned and you're just punting SP2 and hoping that you can get to some more Atlanta bats or whatever it may be, I don't think is a terrible idea.
Mike, how do you make this sidebar each Wednesday morning? I need to know, because if you were to just copy and paste from the bottom of the, by the way, it's not a big deal, but each time there's one game that's not on the slate that is in the bottom of the sidebar. Each time we do this. If you go to the bottom of the run sheet, you can see, do you use the bottom of it? Okay. Yeah, no big deal. It's Oakland and LA. You can pull that from the run sheet. But yes, Chris, that's the only one Cincinnati game today. How about bats here, Adam? 8.5 run total. I mean, Rodriguez is good, as you mentioned. Bito's fine, but it's a good park. It's just Detroit offensively isn't going to inspire much confidence either.
No, of course not. They're one of the worst offenses in baseball, but and Bito has been very good. Small sample, like less than 600 total pitches thrown. He's been very good at limiting power. Sub 100 expected ISO to lefties, sub 100 expected ISO to righties, 296 expected WOBA to righties, 348 to lefties. I don't expect that level of power prevention to continue, but it is interesting. And especially when you keep in mind too, Vito's this guy that when he first came up with the Pirates, we were talking about as like a really, really weird looking pitcher because you don't really know how to quantify him because he's clearly made adjustments over the last year or two. He's, a guy that from 20, up until 2019 was striking out like 17% of hitters. Then this year in AAA, he's striking out 24%. Last year, he struck out 24%. So he's somebody that has pretty clearly gotten better as time's gone on. So we don't know exactly what he is, but he has been good at limiting power so far. It's still likely he's a below average pitcher. And getting to Riley Green and Kerry Carpenter in particular is going to be fine. Torkelson at 3,900 is not a bad play. Neither is McKinstry. So it's not an exciting lineup to get to, but you do have some quality bats. Riley Green's a highly regarded prospect. Kerry Carpenter's got some power. Vierling's having a solid year. So you don't like the Tigers, but they're good enough for a 4-game slate.
Milwaukee and Washington then.
We did just get the Pirates lineup too. Brian Hayes is back, and it is 8 right-handed hitters plus Jack Sawinski.
Okay. What's Rodriguez K rate versus righties?
26%.
Still pretty good.
Yeah, it's about 26% to both sides. The only difference is that righties have a 157 expected ISO, 308 expected WOBA, which still perfectly fine. Lefties sub 100 and 227 respectively. So, obviously if you just for whatever reason got a bunch of lefties, that would be better. But this is what Rodriguez normally faces, and he's still good.
Right. Yeah. Teams generally running out as many righties against lefties as possible. Milwaukee and Washington. Milwaukee minus 135, 9-run total here. So we'll start on the Milwaukee side. Old Wade Miley, our friend Dan Strafford's favorite pitcher, made Wiley. Mackenzie Gore, 2 southpaws on the mound today. Mackenzie Gore against Milwaukee. This would be an interesting place to start because I know you've had some good takes on him throughout the season. So this is a guy that obviously has run into issues at times, but he is striking batters out at 27% today. Do we have lineups out for both of these? I don't think we do yet. Do we? For Milwaukee and Washington? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. But no, Mackenzie Gore is $7,800. Park is, largely fine. You never know what you're going to get from this guy in the sense that a lot of times he'll just have complete blow up performances, but this is a pretty middle of the road matchup, sub 8K on a 4-game slate. What do you think of him today? Just knowing that he does have good strikeout stuff at a mid-range price point.
I think he looks really good here. I mean, he's a good strikeout pitcher. He's modestly priced. He's somebody that on a lot of slates, it ends up being a good low-owned tournament play because you just have, other high-end pitchers that are getting more ownership. But here, I expect him to be popular. 27% strikeout percentage, 3.9 xFIP. It's not a bad matchup against Milwaukee. Their active roster against left-handed pitching since the start of last season has a 102 WRC plus, which ranks 19th, 21.9% K percentage. Not a bad matchup for him at all. 7,800 is a reasonable price tag. I think Gore is, everything considered, like I think the best pitcher on the slate is either Rodriguez or Gore.
Joshua, is anyone getting the correct top stack spreadsheet for very early only? So it's coming. We had to rerun it. They caught some type of snag, so we had to rerun it, but it should be up momentarily. Excuse me. But yeah, that'll be up. Main slate will be up. Everything will be up shortly. We'll have plenty of time for that. Any Wade Miley interest against the Washington Nationals? Maybe he can go 6 scoreless with 2 strikeouts because that's a tough K matchup.
Yeah, it is, but I do think he's a pretty solid value play just because of the slate. You look at the other cheap guys, Vito 5,500 obviously has his own problems. Chirinos at 6,700 doesn't look good. Blanco at 6,300, if he is the one starting for Houston, is reasonable. But 7K Wade Miley, he's not a very good strikeout pitcher, which is why you don't roster him very often in DFS. But normally you're talking about larger than 4-game slates. 16.7% K percentage, 4.78 xFIP. Certainly not a very good pitcher. And, we'll get to the bats. I think Washington looks fine here as well. But he's 7K. He's a major league pitcher, like slightly below average major league pitcher. On this particular slate, especially if you're trying to get to a team like Atlanta, he's perfectly fine. Only a 4-run total for the Nats.
So I'm just going and looking at this now for the early slate. You've got Giolito and Chirinos, neither of whom have a ton of interest. But then like Rodriguez, Vito, Miley, Mackenzie Gore, Really, all four of those guys in some form or fashion, even if it's not getting a ton of exposure, are viable today.
Yeah.
How would you rank them?
Probably Rodriguez
first, right? Or would you put Gore ahead of Rodriguez?
I think Rodriguez won. That's with the assumption that you can still, get to most of the lineups that you want without sacrificing the salary. So probably Rodriguez won, Gore two. Then it becomes tough because it kind of depends like what else do you need in your lineup? Bibby's got a tough matchup. Giolito's got a tough matchup. Those are clearly the next two pitchers in terms of talent. I think it's probably Rodriguez, Gore, and then I end up paying down for like Miley, Blanco, assuming it's Blanco.
Okay. What about bats from either side of this one, Milwaukee and Washington?
They both look okay. Mackenzie Gore has had some power issues this year. The strikeouts are certainly there, but 1.4 home runs allowed per 9 innings. You don't have a lot of power in the Milwaukee lineup. 192 expected ISO to righties, 187 to lefties. So, don't sleep on Christian Yelich. Getting to Contreras and Adames is going to be pretty appealing. Outside of that, it's mostly just that Milwaukee's a value stack and you can get good teams around them. But individually, Yelich, Contreras, Adames are going to look pretty good. On the other side, Miley doesn't miss a lot of bats. He does give up some power. 199 expected ISO to righties this year. Lane Thomas at 4,300 is going to look pretty good. Stone Garrett at 2,200 looks good. You have Keibert Ruiz, who switch hits as a $3,700 catcher. So that's not bad. Abrams, lefty. Abrams has been hitting well lately. He's still only 3,900. He does give you upside at shortstop, but not surprisingly, Miley has been better against lefties.
Rounded out with Cleveland and Houston. So I'm going to check one more time to see if we have a line here. My assumption is we still don't. We don't. It's Tanner Bybee, and then do you know who's starting?
No. I'm seeing Ronel Blanco listed, but
yeah, I just know he was like, has he been back up? Because I know he was optioned a little while ago. Has he been back up? If so, then I assume it's just going to be him.
He last pitched on July 6th.
Yeah, he was optioned on the 8th or the 7th.
Yeah, so I assume that at some point in the next couple of hours, we're going to get Houston reinstates Blanco, and then we get a lineup and a line.
Well, let's talk about Bybee then. He's the third highest pitcher in price, $8,700 against Houston, though. Where does he rank among the other pitchers on a 4-gamer?
Middle. Like in terms of talent, he's one of the top 4. He's having a solid rookie season, 24.5% K percentage, 4.3 xFIP. We're talking about playing Wade Miley and Osvaldo Vito and Ronel Blanco on this slate. So, those numbers obviously make you a viable option. It's just that Houston's back to being pretty healthy. Altuve, may or may not be in the lineup today, but he's been back in general. Tucker, Alvarez was out yesterday. I assume he'll be back today. He's great, makes this lineup a lot better. Bregman's obviously good. McCormick's having a really good year. So it's a tough matchup. Certainly prefer to get to Rodriguez against the Pirates for 800 more when I can, but he is still a solid pitcher. 151 expected ISO to righties this year, only 112 to lefties. Better strikeout percentage against righties at 27% than lefties at 22, as you'd expect. But he looks fine. Just he's like a cheaper Giolito. Like the matchup against Atlanta is more difficult than the matchup against Houston, but it's a good pitcher in a really tough spot. Whereas you have two other good pitchers that are in much better spots.
And I mean, if it's Blanco on the other side, maybe it's a decent matchup against Cleveland just from an overall, limiting base runners perspective. Also, I don't know how long he'd go, assuming that's the case anyway, but they don't strike out. They have the lowest K rate in all of baseball versus lefties and righties. That would seem like a pretty unappealing spot. I'd probably rather just go to Beto or something against Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a terrible pitcher and it's a cheap price tag. Again, no idea if he's even pitching. Like if you Google him and go to the news section, it still doesn't even say anything about him.
I have no idea.
Right. But he did.
Now we just kind of have to assume.
Right. On July 27th against Oakland, AAA team, he did go 5 innings. He went 5 2/3 before that, faced 24 batters in each one. So I'm not concerned about whether or not he's stretched out. Now it's kind of just a matter of, is he pitching? Fangraphs, for what it's worth, also has him listed as the probable starter. So somebody has to be reporting it somewhere, and I just haven't seen it. But overall this year, he does have a 24% K percentage. The problem is that He has a 12% walk percentage. He's allowed 2.3 home runs per nine, and he has a 5.1 xFIP. It's a very tough strikeout matchup, like you said, but he does have more just strikeout ability than guys like Vito and Miley. If it's him at 6,300, I don't mind getting him as a value play. I will be curious to see where the projection ends up, because right now we have him as the highest scoring pitcher on the slate, but that's, I'm sure, a function of not having a line and using some sort of bad assumption on Cleveland's line.
Talk about bats here for a second, assuming it is Blanco and we know it's Tanner Bybee on the other side. What can we take away from this one? Looking, we like you said, we don't have a total, so we don't know. We don't actually know who the pitcher is going to be for Houston. We don't know for sure. And like you said, you Googled it and still nothing really showed up. So maybe this probable on DraftKings is just wrong, or maybe it's right. A lot of times they are actually right with this.
The fact that like FanGraphs also has it makes me think, well, either FanGraphs just made it up and DraftKings pulled from there, or there's some reporter somewhere that has tweeted this and I just haven't seen it.
I'm gonna, but while you talk about bats here, I'm gonna see if I can pull it up on Twitter maybe.
Yeah, so for the Houston side, it's basically just a talent of the offense thing. I mentioned Bybee's numbers before, and he hasn't given up a lot of power this year. He has been a solid pitcher, but it's still a very good Houston lineup. I assume they'll probably come in behind the Braves and the Angels in terms of implied run total and top stack percentage. Cleveland on the other side, not nearly as good an offense. Jose Ramirez is always going to be good. Josh Naylor has power. Jimenez is fine. Brennan's cheap. But overall, not the most exciting offense, but you do have a decent matchup. I mentioned Blanco's power issues, 177 expected ISO to lefties, 245 to righties. So Jose Ramirez, especially on a 4-gamer, is going to stand out. Jimenez and Naylor in particular will look good as well.
Looks like a lot of people saying Blanco on Twitter, but nobody with any, nobody that I know or
right.
That you can trust at all. Right.
Yeah, like it seems like it's very likely that one site decided it was Blanco and every other site is now reporting it's Blanco.
Yeah. All right. Hey, let me throw you this to close out this early slate. If you had to build one lineup, and if you had to build one lineup for the early slate, who would your two pitchers and your top stack be in there, your 5-man stack?
So, ideally Rodriguez, Gore, Braves, but I think that's probably tough. If you go Rodriguez, Gore, you have $4,000 per position left over. So I don't think that's really going to get me Atlanta. So probably Rodriguez, Gore, and the Angels. Angels lineup is out. It is not as good as you would like. There's no Moustakas. There's no somebody else, but Renjifo, Ohtani, Crone, Grichuk, Renfroe. Those 5 are good. Escobar, Neto, Wallach, Adams could do without that whole section.
Okay, I like it.
But they are cheap.
Let's talk main slate. Man, we're north of 100 likes. We got 4 people hanging out with us today for a little early main slate split show action. Absolutely got to love it. Also, if you guys haven't gotten your foot in the door yet, what better way to do it than to be like, hey, I'm going to check out the MLB lineup generator, and I'm going to do it for $4.48 for the first week. Come on, man. No reason not to. We actually had somebody hit me up yesterday or this morning, I should say, with a little $1,500 win using the stochastic tool. Shout out to David Simmons. $1,500 in, there you go, in the mini max again, like in the 20K mini max. I swear, man, tale as old as time. People grab the lineup generator, they grab the tools. They go in, they're like, you know what? These contests are ripe for the picking, and I don't have to spend a ton of money in order to do it. Whether it's the mini max, whether it's the quarter, hell, you're playing the dime, you're putting 20 entries in the dime. You think about it, $4.48 for the first week. Even if you're only playing a couple dollars a day, you hit even a decent win, and you've paid that off for a considerable amount of time. And if you don't, the end of the week, you're down less than $5. And you go, all right, I tried it out. I don't love it. I think you'll love it, because you can set your stack types. You can set how chalky, contrarian, the type of lineups you want, or just go with all stack types and all lineups. I think that makes a lot of sense. You can lock players and swap players out. Be careful with that. Don't be your own worst enemy and destroy your lineups before you even have a chance and be like, well, I only swapped 4 guys out of the lineup that I was given. I don't know why this isn't working. Don't do that. but you can see the optimal projection for every lineup. You can see how chalky or contrarian every lineup is. Of course, the higher optimal projection and the less chalky, the better. So you can discard any lineups you don't want. You can save all the ones you do want. And then once you're done with those lineups, you can go in, you see all of your exposures, all of your stack exposures, each lineup individually. Quite frankly, it shouldn't be 448 for the first week. Probably won't be for long, for being honest, because it's an incredible tool. And especially in lower stakes, man, it's changing the game for a lot of people. So if you want to get in and check that out, you can upload your lineups right to CSV too. So like right in the DraftKings, right in the FanDuel when you save them. I don't know what there isn't to love about it. And it's optimized for your phone. If you enjoy making lineups on your phone, mobile, do that as well. I mean, bing, bang, boom. You're in, you're out. Make as many lineups as you want. Throw them in for $4.48 for the first week. Be like David Simmons. Be like all these other guys that have taken down big wins recently, and so many of them with like the mini max and the quarter and stuff. And that just makes it well worthwhile every single time I talk about it. So link in the description, link in the chat. If you guys have any questions about it, always hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are open. And if you're looking to step your game up, and you're looking to go with the lineup simulator, which is basically the generator on steroids with far more options, that's in the description, or 50% off all of our Stochastic Plus Platinum, which is every single sport across the board, all the tools. Also 50% off for the week or the month. Pick and choose whichever one you want. Pick your poison. We got something for anyone. Starting low, starting high, starting in the middle. We got you covered. Links to all that in chat or in the description. All right, let's keep going here. Main slate, Adam. Tampa Bay and New York Yankees. Shane McClanahan, Garrett Cole. Fun pitching matchup here at Yankee Stadium, though. Obviously not a pitcher's haven by any standard, but 7.5 run total. Two really good pitchers. How do we approach them on the main slate where we now have 8 games to talk about?
Yeah, and plenty of good pitching on this slate, but they both are still, at the very least, interesting in tournaments. Like, though we don't have, top pitchers yet, but you're either going to get these guys grading out as two of the better pitchers, or you're going to get them at low ownership. And pitchers of this quality, if they're low owned, they're still at least somewhat interesting. Garrett Cole is the highest projected pitcher on the slate, 10.8K price tag, nothing wrong with that. About a 3.7 to 3.8 implied run total for the Rays against him. He has a 27% K percentage this year, 3.62 xFIP. Not quite as dominant as we've seen in previous years, but still obviously very, very good. So Cole, one way or the other, is going to be a good play, whether it's just he is showing up as like the best pitcher or he's low owned. Same goes for McClanahan. The Yankees lineup obviously isn't that good. Aaron Judge being back helps it, but still a pretty weak bottom of the order if you're able to navigate your way through Torres, Judge, and Stanton. McClanahan's very good, and most importantly, his salary's dropped. He's only $9,300 now on DraftKings, striking out 26% of hitters this year, 3.83 xFIP, 9% walk percentage is a little bit higher than you would like, but he's going to look good here. We have him projected as the 5th highest scoring pitcher, but still not far behind some of these other guys. So both pitchers, despite it being Yankee Stadium, are still pretty appealing.
Does that make bats a lot less appealing?
I think this is, and it was the case last night, but even more so tonight. I can't really make any case for the offenses here other than they're hitting in Yankee Stadium, and sometimes you hit a bunch of fly balls in Yankee Stadium that end up being home runs. But, it's two pitchers that I don't have any sort of case for like, oh, you should stack against them because they're bad at this or whatever it may be. Garrett Cole, 154 expected ISO to lefties this year. It's lower to righties. Shane McClanahan, 173 expected ISO to righties this year, but also a 28% K percentage, 307 expected WOBA. Clearly, Aaron Judge is a good play. He always is. Somebody like Brandon Lau at second base is always going to be a good play, but it's really difficult to make any sort of real case for these offenses.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if we go on and we look at this next one with Baltimore and Toronto, Baltimore plus 105, 8.5 run total. Grayson Rodriguez, Yusei Kikuchi. You buying back into Grayson Rodriguez? Where are we at on him now?
I absolutely love him.
Yeah,
so I mean, I don't necessarily mean I love him today. It's a tough matchup against Toronto. They're hard to strike out. They have good hitters, but he has looked very good since coming back from the minors. And keep in mind too, so his overall numbers this season, his surface numbers suck. 6.2 ERA, 1.88 home runs per 9. But even when he was up earlier in the year, it was very much a case of he either has his command today or he doesn't. You had some starts where he was very good, and then you had other starts where he's giving up, 8 earned runs, and it was kind of like no in between. So he'd already shown the ability to be good on a start to start basis. They sent him back to the minors. They told him to work on his command, his fastball command, and since he's come back, he's getting ahead in counts. It's making everything he throws more effective. He's throwing a little bit harder. I know his first start back, he threw 8 pitches in the first inning that were faster than any pitch he had thrown in his previous stint in the majors. He was hitting 100 miles an hour in, I think, the 6th inning last start. He went deeper than he ever has into a game last start, getting into the 7th inning. And it's not like he's had easy matchups either. He faced Tampa Bay. He's faced the Dodgers since coming back. So yeah, it's a tough matchup with Toronto, but he's had success in tough matchups already. The stuff is there, and he's only 7,200. This is, from a talent standpoint, somebody that should be, at least from an upside, like a talent upside standpoint, he should be 9K. From when you factor in the fact he's a rookie and all of that, yeah, he should be less expensive, but he's not limited. He's 7,200. He's struck out 26% of hitters so far this year, 25.5% of hitters so far this year, despite not having any idea where the ball was going in half of his starts. Pretty easy sell for me at 7,200.
720 Red Dog said, Lafayette, I almost got evicted, but thanks to Stochastic, I now only owe my landlord $20 in late rent fees. I don't know whether to say that is awesome, and I'm very happy that our tools could help, or it's wildly irresponsible, Adam. I don't know. I'm not sure which one that is, but Red Dog, I'm glad you're not getting evicted, although it seems impossible to evict people these days anyway. You could have just squatted for 15 months and no one would have done anything, depending on where you live. But I love to see that the tools are working for you. That's going to be my new read. Are you close to getting evicted? The MLB lineup generator is $4.48 for your first week. What's an extra $5 when you're about to be on the street anyway?
Right. I thought you were asking me. I was like, no, man, last week helped me out.
Yeah. Man, yeah, I'm sure everyone up top and would love those type of reads. Like,
oh yeah, I can't see why they wouldn't.
Are you close to being on the streets of Kensington? Well, fret not. No, I'm joking, everybody. Dear God. All right. Where are we at? Kikuchi or do you want to hit bats here?
Yeah, Kikuchi, I mean, we actually have him projected a little bit ahead of Rodriguez, only a 4.1 implied run total for Baltimore. Still a dangerous spot for him, but this park has downplayed power this year, which that's generally what he struggles with. Overall, a 25% K percentage to righties has also allowed a 211 expected ISO. So, boom or bust spot for him, but at 7,800, still certainly a reasonable play. It's not like he's any less safe than Grayson Rodriguez. So this is a really interesting game in that you have good offenses and they certainly have upside, but you also have 2 mid-range pitchers that have pretty nice ceilings as well.
Yeah, you absolutely do. Now, if you want to talk about, do you want to talk bats here any further? You want to talk Minnesota, St. Louis? Because this one's interesting.
No, I think the bats are interesting too, because, Rodriguez has looked very good since coming back, but we've still seen him struggle at times in his rookie season, and lefties in particular have been the problem. 400 expected WOBA, 258 expected ISO. I've said it a lot of times. He has a good changeup. I don't expect those problems to continue, but if they were to continue, you're looking at Brandon Belt at 3,300 as the most likely culprit. Righties haven't had as much success, but you still have Guerrero, Springer, Merrifield, Chapman in this lineup. So they look like a decent, middle of the road stack, but certainly have the potential to put up a big game. And then the same thing for Baltimore. I think they're actually a little bit more interesting to me than Toronto, even though they are the dogs here, because Kikuchi does allow power. 211 expected ISO to righties, as I mentioned. And while some of the Orioles' best hitters are left-handed, Rutschman's just going to turn around to the right side. Mountcastle's been hitting ever since coming back from the injured list, which is noteworthy because he had gone to the injured list with vertigo. So, and he said it was affecting his vision and making it hard to hit. So there is actually some sort of legitimate reason why he would suddenly be able to hit again. Santander, Hayes from the right side, Westberg and Urias should be in there. Gunnar Henderson has suddenly started hitting left-handed pitching as well, which, good luck if you're a pitcher. But also, Kikuchi's allowed a 191 expected ISO to lefties this year. So if you get Gunnar Henderson in the lineup, you certainly shouldn't be shying away from him. I think, and at their cheap prices as well, I actually like the Orioles a little bit more than the Jays.
We have ownership, by the way.
Okay, cool.
Top stacks and top pitchers. Man, look at the ownership once you refresh and get this updated. Look at the ownership on pitchers for this main slate. It's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10 guys with double-digit ownership right now.
Yeah, I'll say it seems like it should be pretty flat just because you have like a lot of good pitchers.
Yeah, I mean, Garrett Cole is very popular. We'll talk about Tony Gonsolin, Dylan Cease. Kikuchi's 21%. All right, interesting. That helps us out quite a bit as we work into this Minnesota St. Louis one. Joe Ryan, 12% ownership at 10-1. You know, I don't want to ask you if you like him or dislike him, but I'm more so interested in your thoughts of Garrett Cole, 33%, Joe Ryan, 12%. Similarly priced, only two guys north of 10K. Logan Webb's 9,800 too. Kodai Senga's 9,500. But do you like that Garrett Cole ownership now that we have it compared to these other top tier pitchers at similar price points?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, if you want to argue that he shouldn't be 3 times as popular as Joe Ryan, I wouldn't disagree with you, but he does project better than Ryan. You know, St. Louis doesn't strike out a lot. Ryan is a good strikeout pitcher. Highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 29.5%, 3.67 xFIP. But, you know, certainly not the same track record as Garrett Cole either. 4 flat implied run total for the Cards is slightly higher than Tampa. So I prefer Cole, but there's nothing wrong in individual lineups with having Joe Ryan instead to save some ownership, given that he is only projected for about 12%. He looks like he's going a little bit under-owned. It's just that generally I don't end up taking that many big stands on under-owned pitchers. I generally end up pretty close to the field.
Okay. Yeah. I would you rather take stands on under-owned expensive pitchers or under-owned low-owned pitchers? Because it seems when an under-owned
you mean cheap?
Yeah, I'm sorry, cheap pitcher. Because
cheap.
Yeah, because with a cheap pitcher, a lot of times when they get steamed and they're super popular, it doesn't make them good. It makes them a good matchup, but it doesn't make them any better than they were the day before. So it seems like there's probably, you know, higher likelihood down there with some of those cheaper options that, you know, the bad cheap player that has a good matchup just doesn't pitch well and one of the other guys is okay.
Right. And also you get the benefit of different roster construction, especially if it's a slate where there are expensive stacks that look good. You know, obviously on slates where there's a bunch of good cheap stacks, it doesn't really matter as much. But, you know, if you hit on a low owned cheap pitcher, at least in theory, that is really powerful because it's giving you the same fantasy. It's so hard for like top end pitchers to really separate. You know, obviously, if you go throw a no-hitter like Framber Valdez did yesterday, you will. But, you know, generally, if you get 30 fantasy points, that's a really big game. And so it's hard to like separate that much from good game to good game. And so it can be really powerful if you do get like that 22-point cheap pitcher at low ownership. You're just in a really, really good spot. Whereas if you're being contrarian with the top end pitching, that can be fine. You know, if Garrett Cole sucks and Joe Ryan beats him, a third of the field just lost and you're, you know, looking really good with Joe Ryan. But it's still, assuming they both pitch relatively well, you're just talking about, you know, a very small difference between them typically.
Dakota Hudson's only thrown 19 1/3 innings this year. He's striking batters out at 14.6%, 4.76 xFIP. No real power allowed whatsoever. Minnesota does strike out at the highest clip in the league against right-handed pitching, but I don't know if we can really bank on a lot of strikeouts or how deep Hudson can pitch into this game, given that only one of his 7 appearances has been a start. What do you think about him today? And what do you think about bats, specifically Minnesota?
Yeah, I'm interested in Minnesota. I don't have interest in getting to Hudson at 7,700, but Minnesota does have power. Dakota Hudson's always been kind of a weird pitcher. Does an okay job limiting power, doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. Very limited sample in the majors so far this year. He's only thrown 353 pitches. But since the start of last year, only a 126 expected ISO to lefties. Also only a 12.5% strikeout percentage. Minnesota, all they do is strike out and hit the ball really far. So something's got to give here because you have a pitcher that doesn't strike guys out and doesn't give up power, and you have a team that only strikes out and hits for power. So don't know how it's going to go, but the upside is certainly there if you're going to let this Minnesota team put the ball in play. So it does make them interesting. They are reasonably priced as well. We have them 5th in top stack percentage. We have them 2nd in stack score, 4.5 implied run total. I think Minnesota looks pretty good here.
Any interest in St. Louis, or should we move to this White Sox-Texas game?
Not too much. Ryan has allowed a 195 expected ISO to righties, but it's a sub 300 expected WOBA, 34% strikeout percentage. It kind of just boils down to like Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Wilson Contreras, Tyler O'Neill. These guys have power. They can get into one if you just want a low-owned one-off that has upside. But other than that, it's a pretty unappealing spot for the Cards.
Dylan Cease is very popular despite going up against the Texas Rangers. 28% strikeout rate this season. That is pretty interesting. He's had a handful of strong games recently, nothing out of control, but it is not the easiest of matchups. His price is down at 8,400, which seems reasonable enough. But yeah, 21%, Adam, going to Dylan Cease today against the Texas Rangers. Currently, the third highest owned pitcher on this slate, essentially tied with Kikuchi and Logan Webb around that low 20 mark.
Yeah, it's just a pricing issue. Fourth highest strikeout percentage behind Ryan, Senga, and actually, I guess Wheeler, not on the slate, but he's pitching today. So third highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 27.6%, just ahead of Garrett Cole, 3.9 xFIP, slightly worse than Cole, but 0.3 of a run, nothing crazy. 0.91 home runs per nine. Cole's at 0.86. I mean, in terms of what they've done this year, Cease hasn't been as good, but he's been pretty comparable to Cole, and he's $2,400 less expensive. Tough matchup with Texas for sure, but it's not like Cole has a a good matchup with Tampa Bay. It's not like Joe Ryan has a good matchup with the Cardinals. So the ownership here is scary, given that Texas is a good offense. They do have a 4.5 implied run total, but 22%, not too problematic given that price tag. And also, when you look at the pitchers in his price range, there is some upside. You have Kikuchi at 7,800, you have Grayson at 7,200, but there's not a lot that you're really going to like in there.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Like Gonsolin's getting 28%, which is fine, but Kikuchi's getting the same ownership basically as Cease.
Right. Yeah,
all this is really just making me like Grayson Rodriguez.
Yeah, you like the 6.7% Grayson Rodriguez against Toronto. It's 7,200. Sure.
Yeah.
Gonsolin,
like he's getting half the ownership of Drew Smiley.
What's that?
He's getting half the ownership of Drew Smiley.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I mean, Gonsolin, Kikuchi, and Grayson Rodriguez are all similarly priced. So is Dakota Hudson, but he's getting no ownership whatsoever. So you think Rodriguez could be a viable pivot off of those guys in some spots?
Yeah. I mean, I think he should be the lowest owned, just looking at projections. There is a gap between him and these other guys, but understanding the range of outcomes and how good his strikeout stuff is, I don't think he should just be getting. It's not like, you say Kikuchi's a great pitcher or a safe pitcher or any of that. And he's getting a bunch more. Drew Smiley's not a good pitcher and he's getting double the ownership. So, it's just a spot where it strikes me where like, yeah, if I could get to like 15% Rodriguez and kind of subtract a little bit off of like Kikuchi, that would be perfectly fine with me.
I know the White Sox make for a pretty decent matchup for opposing pitchers, but what do you make of Dane Dunning at 10% owned, $6,100? We're talking about a 15% strikeout rate on the season, 4.75 xFIP. Some numbers that aren't really going to be all that inspiring. Hasn't given up a ton of power, but aside from that, the upside has been very low.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised at the ownership just because it didn't strike me as a slate where you really need to be dumpster diving at pitcher. You have this range of, $7K to $8,500 guys that have some upside with Grayson, Kikuchi, Gonsolin, Cease. So like you have that pretty solid mid-range. The top end pitching isn't that expensive. Cole at the top at 10.8, but you have Senga at 95, you have Webb at 98. Didn't strike me as, and you don't have the Braves on the slate. It didn't strike me as a slate where you really need to be dumpster diving for Dane Dunning. But if you do need to go down to that price range, I think he is the top option down there, like sub 6,500. Certainly you can make the case he's not 10 times better than Brandon Williamson, but I would prefer getting to Dunning over Williamson. Hogan Harris faces the Dodgers, but really I just would like to not really have to deal with that range that much.
What about White Sox or Rangers bats here? Both pitchers getting a little bit of ownership, only around 10% going to Dunning. But neither have given up a ton of power here. Obviously, you could probably get to Dunning, but are these two of these spots? Do they interest you? God, almost 10% walk rate for Dylan Cease. That has been a bit of an issue.
Yeah,
but what are your thoughts on bats here?
Yeah, I think they're both just kind of middle of the road spots. We have the White Sox like 9th in stack score. Texas is 11th. Both pulling 5 to 6% ownership, both with 5 to 6% chances of being the top stack. There is still plenty of power upside for the Rangers. They're missing Seager, they're missing Heim, so that does water down their lineup. But it does also give you more value with Jankowski being towards the top of the order, Mitch Garver being a cheap catching option. We've had Brad Miller in the lineup recently. He's nearly minimum salary. So Cease is certainly a good pitcher, and he has been good at limiting power. Texas is still a good offense. 4.5 implied run total. They look okay. And then the White Sox on the other side, clearly with the better matchup, but not as good an offense. They don't have Jake Berger anymore. He was traded to Miami. So that does hurt the power upside of this lineup. But Luis Robert's still very good. He can carry a stack. Eloy Jimenez is only 4K. Vaughn's got some power. And then you just kind of mix in Anderson, Moncada, hope that they think it's like 4 years ago and that they know how to hit. Maybe Benintendi accidentally like slaps a double to left field. But the Robert Jimenez Vaughn portion at least has enough power that it gives you some upside.
Hey, do we want to go back to the Chicago Cubs bats today against Brandon Williamson? 1.4 home runs per 9, only striking out 17.8% of batters, puts a lot of guys on base. They look good in the top stacks tool, second highest top stack probability behind only the Dodgers. And the highest stack score on this main slate of any team is going to the Cubs right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would go to my high school against Brandon Williamson. Like, he's been that bad. 232 expected ISO to righties, only 122 to lefties, 17 to 18% strikeout percentage against both sides. But yeah, the Cubs look good here again. Horner, 4,600, no issues with that. Swanson's been very good. He's only 4,400 at shortstop. That looks like a fantastic play. Christopher Morel doesn't have the name value, but to justify his price tag, but the numbers have been there. He hits for power. They have Candelario in there now at third base. He's 4,200. Lefty. Bellinger isn't going to look great. He is 4,900, but from a stacking standpoint, that's fine. You have very inexpensive price tags on Happ, Suzuki, Gomes. Pretty nice balance of upside and salary here for the Cubs. You mentioned that they're showing up well in the top stacks tool, third in top stack percentage, third in stack score. The only negative here is that this game's in Chicago and not in Cincinnati.
Yeah, what's weather look like?
Looks like right to left.
Okay.
80 degrees.
Didn't need it yesterday for them to absolutely annihilate the baseball. Yeah. It's a pretty good spot. Pretty good spot against Williamson. Sure, you'd like him at Great American Ballpark, but not sure how much it matters at this point. On the other side, Drew Smyly, pulling 11% ownership right now. You talked about that Grayson Rodriguez ownership compared to the $6,800 Smyly, who's only $400 less expensive up against the Cincinnati club. Hey, at this point, what do you do with Drew Smyly today?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand. This is the kind of spot that I hate in baseball. Like, he projects pretty well. We have him slightly ahead of Rodriguez, and I've seen him higher elsewhere. Like, I don't get it. I would much rather play Rodriguez. I also am not going to manually change anything in projections, so I'm going to end up, I guess, with Smyly ahead of him. But it's just such a hard thing for me to explain. Like, 20.7% strikeout percentage is mediocre. 4.7 xFIP isn't very good. 1.5 home runs per 9. 4.7 implied run total for the Reds. There's not a single thing I can point to and say this is why Drew Smyly looks good. He is projecting reasonably well. He is cheap. I guess he's fine. I can't explain it though.
All right. Do you like Cincinnati bats then with that in mind, or is this kind of just a wash for the most part?
It's just tough because of the pricing. De La Cruz, 6,100. He has also been useless against lefties. Now, Smyly obviously isn't the most dominant lefty. A lot of De La Cruz's numbers against lefties, you're talking about facing, left-handed specialist or relievers. So that's going to drive it down. 193 expected ISO to lefties for Smyly. So I'm not saying, to like skip De La Cruz if you're playing the Reds, but he has been pretty bad against lefties. But, Senzel's going to look good at 3,200. He's cheap. Steer's fine at 4,300. Matt McLean's still priced up to 5,600. So as a stack, they're getting cheaper. It's just that the guys that I like the most in De La Cruz and McLean are still really expensive, but decent, another middle of the road stack. I think they're fifth in stack score, 4.5% chance of being the top value, 9% chance of being the top stack is fourth highest. So Reds are fine. I think the Cubs look a little bit better, but don't mind the Reds either.
All right, 5 down, 3 to go here. Hey, as you guys already know, by the way, the best type of money is the free kind. It's that simple. And when you're on these pick'em sites, it's funny right now because it reminds me of like when sports books all started. Not that this is sports betting, it's different, it's particularly in non-legal betting sites for that reason. It's a fantasy game. But like when books all came online not so many years ago, they were all just throwing out the best possible offers to get you in the door. And if you were wise, I saw Ben do a football video the other day talking about how like if the biggest mistake he made when everything came live in New York was not taking advantage of all of the bonuses possible, and now they're gone. you look at these fantasy platforms, these pick'em platforms, and there's a lot of good ones out there. They're all doing the same thing, trying to get your business. And in doing so, they're going to offer some crazy free squares, some crazy sign-up bonuses. And you're probably, if you've done it right, you're probably on a lot of them already. Boom Fantasy has two things going for them for today only. First off, Mookie Betts, under 999 home runs. Under 999 and a half home runs. So you've got a legitimate free square that you're slotting into your card, into your entry out of the gate. It's not like over a half a yard in football where if he gets hurt early on, it's technically not a free square, even though it really is, but you get my point. This is under 999 and a half home runs. So in order for this to lose, Mookie Betts would need to hit 1,000 home runs today. Highly unlikely. You slot that into your entry if you're not on Boom yet. Now, here's what you do. We have the link in the description and in the chat. Take advantage of the free money by doing that. And in doing so, not only are you getting the Mookie Betts free square, legitimate free square, 100% hit rate on this, but also every new user at Boom gets a $100 no sweat first entry. So if your first entry loses, it's refunded up to $100 in bonus money. And you have a free pick as well. I'll go one step further. All new users on Boom eligible to make an entry featuring a player whose stat total is set to under 99 and a half. So my guess is if you're a new user, you get this, and then you've got another entry because you're a new user. So you have Mookie Betts, and then if you wanted to throw another entry in, you have another option to grab one at under 99 and a half. So the way I see it is 2 free squares the moment you sign up, plus $100 no sweat first entry. Yeah. I mean, that to me makes more sense than anything. The best free money, or the best money, is the free kind, the free money. Take advantage of free money. Even if you have a pick'em site of your choice, go throw a few bucks over here and say, I'll take you up on your free money offer. Thank you, sir. Boom Fantasy, link in the description and in the chat. Check it out. Mookie Betts under 999 and a half home runs today is your free square. And it looks like as a new user, you're getting another one as well for a separate entry. All right, let's talk about the Mets and the Kansas City Royals. You have Senga going. He's pulling decent ownership right now at 20%. Same ballpark as Webb, Kikuchi, Dylan Cease, all of those guys within like 20 to 22%. And then opposite him, it's a spot that I don't necessarily know how much you want to dive into, but we can. So let's just start it off with Kodai Senga against Kansas City here. Get your initial thoughts, and then we can work through the rest of this game.
Yeah, he's a good pitcher in a good park facing a below average offense. Kansas City's active roster this year is one of the worst in baseball against right-handed pitching. In terms of strikeout percentage, they are 11th at 23.2%. 85 WRC plus is very close to the bottom. So it looks good for Senga. He's a good strikeout pitcher, having a solid first season in the majors. 29.1% K percentage is second highest behind Ryan. 3.8 xFIP, less than a home run per 9. There's been a lot of slates this year where it's kind of been, Kodai Senga is an okay contrarian play because he's not that popular. Not totally the case here. He is getting 19.5% ownership, but he's second in top 2 pitcher percentage at 21.9%. He's got a 12% chance of being a top 2 value. That's the highest of any of the top 5 pitchers in top 2 percentage. I think Senga looks great.
What about on the other side? Cole Ragans. He's not even in the player pool today. Okay, wait. So he has pitched 29 and a third innings this year at the major league level. Do you see him anywhere in the player pool? I don't
think he's in the player pool, no.
Yeah. All right. So that's interesting. So 18 appearances, 1 start, 4.94 xFIP, 21% K rate, 13%, almost a 13% walk rate. What do you think of the Mets?
Yeah, I think the Mets look pretty good. Ragans made 9 starts for Texas in the majors last year. He wasn't anything special. First round pick, does have talent, could eventually figure things out, but probably not going to be today. Mets offense obviously is pretty dangerous. They have plenty of good hitters. Now, they did lose Tommy Pham at the deadline yesterday, so that does take away one of their better right-handed hitters. He went to Arizona, I believe. But since the start of last year, 19% K percentage to righties, 15.5% to lefties for Regans, only a 140 expected ISO to righties and 169 to lefties. Hasn't really had power issues, but Nimmo, Lindor, McNeil, Alonso, Alvarez, those guys all can certainly do damage. Marte at 3,700 is going to look pretty good. Vientos at 2K flat with MPE. So it's not as strong a Mets lineup as you've had, but you still have Pete Alonso in there, who individually is going to look really good. Lindor is always going to be one of your better shortstop options. Vientos just shouldn't be 2K. So yeah, the Mets look pretty good overall. They offer some value. They offer some upside. We have them first in top stack percentage. We have them first in stack score. They are neck and neck with the Cubs and Dodgers in terms of ownership. Everything just looks pretty good for the Mets. The only thing not to like, I think, is that the game is in Kansas City. So not the best hitter's park. Wind's blowing in a bit. It is supposed to be 85 to 90 degrees, though.
I always find it incredible on Twitter how Mets fans are just so confidently, boisterous about how bad every other team is and how good they are. And it just ends the same way every season. I don't know. At some point, you would think that they would just get the point. You would think eventually, but apparently not. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Like any other team tweets something and it's just a slew of Mets fans, particularly NL East team, a slew of Mets fans talking about why the Mets are superior, which is objectively wrong every single time.
Yeah, and I agree with David in chat. He said he loves how they handled the deadline, but obviously disappointed with the season. They had a good deadline. They essentially bought prospects from other teams by giving away Scherzer and Verlander and paying most of their salaries. They got good prospects back. I assume they'll screw them up like they do everything else, but it was a good deadline for them. But obviously, like, just such a bad season.
Yeah, no, good deadline. That's good stuff. David said the Philly and Laffy's coming out. Now, you know what it is, man? You can feel it. First of all, you go in and look at Philly. A lot of the comments, and you always get that from me in the tweets, are basically just us being eternal pessimists and be like, yep, well, we knew this was going to happen. With the Mets, it's not. It's just always like, yeah, we own you guys. Yeah,
right.
Until you get to the wild card round. Yeah, what does it matter? So I guess it's just a different way of thinking around these ways, despite both of us being in the Northeast.
I also think in general, like every team's fan base on Twitter or social media is going to suck. Like the Orioles, like any random Orioles tweets yesterday were just like pissing me off. Like we have a GM that has like done everything right since he got here. Like everything he's done works. And then you just have people like losing their minds because they're not excited enough about the trades that he made yesterday.
For sure.
He should have done all this stuff that, like, I'm sure wasn't even possible, or he just shouldn't have done.
And you're also right. It's all teams for sure. I just meant the Mets I've found are the most confident when they shouldn't be.
Right.
Not just uneducated, because yeah, sure, Twitter is just littered with that, but it's a little bit different with the Mets. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is because I'm a Phillies fan. Probably. Who knows? But anyway, any interest in Kansas City bats, or should we finish these final two games off?
I hate that question.
I know, and I wasn't going to ask you, but I know that you.
No, I'm not interested in Kansas City. I can't speak for my computer, but it's the same thing. Like it's a bad matchup. So there's that. Normally, or at least a lot of times with KC, it's like, well, they're not very good, but it's an okay matchup. They have a lot of upside. Bobby Witt, Salvador Perez, sure, but I mean, Senga's good. I'm not looking to target against him, especially with one of the worst offenses in baseball. There's no glaring red flags for Senga that you can attack. 160 expected ISO to righties, sub 100 to lefties. He's striking lefties out 30.5% of the time. He's striking righties out 27.5% of the time. If there's ever going to be a day that I don't have Kansas City, it would be a day like today.
All right. So let's talk about this next game, Arizona and San Francisco. How do you even say his name? Slade Ciccone?
I have no idea. I wasn't planning on saying it.
It's double C's. So
Ciccone, probably.
That's what I was thinking. But with the double C's, for some reason, I thought that would give us the H.
Yeah. Ciccone.
That's what I was thinking.
That just sounds weird. I feel like I've never heard that.
It's very odd.
It's probably a K, Ciccone.
Oh. Yeah, I bet you're right. Ciccone. If I had to guess, I'm going with your assumption right there. That seems to make the most sense.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say the first time, but I put the CH at the beginning and said Ciccone. But yeah, I think it's Ciccone.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right. So with that in mind, dude, I don't know what to make of this guy. He's coming up from AAA to 103 innings at AAA this year, 23% strikeout rate, and I know pitching in the PCL. I get that, pitching in a difficult, but 2.01 home runs per nine, 5.5 xFIP. So even if you were to remove the fact that he's pitching in a difficult, what would you call it? Division, league, whatever. League. That is still not very good.
No, it's not. And he doesn't project to be that good in the majors either. Sometimes you will see guys, and especially when they're coming out of the PCL, where it's just like, oh my God, their minor numbers are bad. And then you look at rest of season projections and it's just like, oh, he is like average. Not the case here. The publicly available projections on FanGraphs have him between a 4.8 and 5.2 FIP rest of season, 17 to 18% strikeout percentage. So doesn't project to be very good. It is a nice park upgrade for him going from Reno and wherever else he was playing to San Francisco, but still plenty of left-handed power here. 4.7 implied run total for the Giants. He's not minimum salary either. If you give me a 4K price tag on this guy, I could start maybe coming up with some reasons to try it out. 6,500 is pretty tough.
To try it out. Yeah, give it a spin.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at like 4.7 run totals in San Francisco, that also says a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, like, he's young. He just turned 24. He could be good at some point. He moved pretty quickly through the minors, but right now, probably not very good.
What about San Francisco bats? And then we can talk about Cobb.
Yeah, I think they're pretty interesting, just given that you're facing a pitcher who's probably not very good right now, and they do have a lot of power. They are 6th in stack score, 6% chance of being the top stack, 5% ownership, but about a 12% chance of being the top value stack, which is second highest on the slate, just edging out Oakland. So that's pretty interesting to see. I mean, Lamont Wade at 3,500 is just a mispricing. Same for Conforto. Peterson's only 4K. He's the second most expensive guy on the team behind $4,100 JD Davis. Patrick Bailey can hit for a catcher at 3,300. So they're a high upside value team to get to. I mentioned it yesterday, I think, or the day before. Against right-handed pitching this year, San Francisco's active roster has like a 170. I was looking at lefties. Against righties this year, San Francisco's active roster has a 172 ISO. That's not a stat that adjusts for park. So even playing their home games in San Francisco, give or take half their games this year, they have a 170 plus ISO on their active roster. This team has power, and the salaries are just adjusted for where they play. It's kind of like when DraftKings used to actually adjust pricing for Coors Field. And so like the first game out of Coors, you would get the Rockies at, 6,500 across the board and they'd be unplayable. They don't really do that anymore, but they've also just like permanently adjusted the Giants for San Francisco, where even when they were playing in Cincinnati, they were $3,500 across the board. But the point I'm making here is that, yes, the park is bad for hitting home runs, but that becomes less of an issue when the hitters you're talking about in terms of their talent levels are like 5K hitters and they're $3,500.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable way to look at it. Do we have, let's see, I have 5.8% top stack probability. So
like I'm looking at expected ISO against right-handed pitching for the individual hitters on the Giants right now this season. Lamont Wade, 220 expected ISO. Conforto, 177. Davis, 163. Peterson, 267. Bailey, 201. Sable, 193. I mean, there is power everywhere in this lineup pretty much.
Yeah, no question. It's a good spot, just not a good park. And that not a good park for hitters bodes pretty well for Logan Webb as well, right? I mean, he's pulling 20.5% ownership. He is almost 10K, and it is, to be fair, an Arizona team that has one of the lower strikeout rates in the league, but this park should do you some favors when balls are put in play. How do you rank Webb among the rest of these top tier options?
Yeah, like I'm a little bit surprised at the ownership, just given that he's not cheap and he doesn't have a good matchup. I have a hard time justifying why he would be the same ownership or even be getting slightly more ownership than Kodai Senga, given that Senga's facing KC and Webb is facing Arizona. I think they should be similar. We have them second and third in projection today, but I would probably get to Senga first. Arizona does have the lower implied run total, though, only 3.3. The game is in San Francisco. Webb has a 2.96 xFIP this year. Very good pitcher, about a 25% strikeout percentage. That's up from previous years, only striking out 4% of hitters. So Webb does look very, very good. I think he's a good play. I'm just a little surprised that he's not available at a little bit of an ownership discount to Senga.
Let's wrap this one up. Oakland and the Dodgers. By the way, thank you guys. Over 400 with us right now. We got 158 likes. Just putting up some remarkable numbers recently. I don't know what maybe people are just stoked for NFL season. That could be what it is. And before we get to this last game, remember, lineup generator 448 for the first week, or just you want to run the gamut, all of our tools for all sports, 50% off the whole month or the whole week, or if you just wanted to do a single sport and get that free square on Boom Fantasy, if nothing else. Free square, 100% or $100, no sweat first entry, and another free square as your new user. All of that down there in the description and in chat. Hogan Harris against Tony Gonsolin. Let's talk about Gonsolin first, because we're not going to be getting into Hogan Harris, playing him outside of the fact that we'll talk about some Dodger bats here. And 2 of the 3 that were questionable going into yesterday in that Dodgers lineup were active. So we'll see if everybody's back by today. But more than anything, it's 2 things. Tony Gonsolin at 28% against a terrible Oakland team. And then on the other side, Dodgers bats at Dodger Stadium against Hogan Harris and then Oakland A's relief pitchers.
Yeah, Gonsolin looks good at this price in this matchup. He hasn't been good this year. 19.7% K percentage, 5.08 xFIP, walking 9.5% of hitters. Certainly hasn't been the same quality of pitcher that we've seen in the past, but it is a good matchup. 3.2 implied run total. He's only 7,500. He's only gone 5 innings in each of his last 3 starts, but 54 pitches, 92 pitches, and then 109 pitches. You know, he didn't get very far into the game with the 109 pitches, but the fact they let him throw it is certainly encouraging. I'm not expecting that again, but at least you can expect, 90 to 95 from him. So he looks good. I think he should be the most popular pitcher in this price range. He should be one of the more popular pitchers on the slate. Again, if you want to make the case, just comparing pitcher to pitcher, that Grayson Rodriguez gives you the same range of outcomes, if not better, and is getting 1/5 the ownership, sure. But Gonsolin does project well, 3.2 implied run total. Terrible Oakland team. So yeah, Gonsolin looks good, even though there are certainly some red flags in the way he's pitched so far this year.
Did you know YouTube originally started off as a dating site?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah. How did that work?
Like you'd upload your videos.
Oh, is that why Baker's doesn't exist?
I don't know. I don't know, but yeah, it was originally a dating site. Interesting little tip. I'll always give you guys a little something here, especially on these long shows. Go tell your friends. Be the cool guy at the party when you tell everyone. I just saw somebody asking some wild questions about like this and that and said, since YouTube has been created or invented, it just reminded me that, it was originally a dating site and it just failed miserably. And then it was like, hey, come upload your content. Dodger bats, Oakland bats. We can start with the Dodgers and you can close it out with Oakland if you have anything there. But I mean, Dodgers are massive favorites at home today. One of the highest run total on the slate, and a top stack probability that currently sits at 13.6%. Implied total north of 6. One of the higher stack scores on the slate. The only question now is, what do you do with their high prices? And how does that fit in with some other high priced pitching if you're rostering Dodger stacks?
Yeah, I mean, if you can get there, great. Hogan Harris is not a terrible pitcher. He projects to be pretty average at this point in his career. 192 expected ISO, 19.7% K percentage to righties so far, 22% K percentage to lefties, 193 expected ISO. So, not a horrible pitcher, but certainly not the kind of guy that you're shying away from if you're talking about playing Dodgers hitters. And then on top of that, you do have a weak Oakland bullpen behind him. You have a big park downgrade. LA, one of the best home run parks in baseball. Dodgers look great as long as you can find the salary. And I don't think it should be that difficult for a couple of reasons. One is that there is a solid mid-range of pitchers. None of them are perfect, but Gonsolin, Kikuchi, Rodriguez, Smiley, there's plenty of options here where at least one of those guys is probably going to have a good enough game. So you can use them to get to the Dodgers. But then also, in the aggregate, the Dodgers are expensive because Betts is 6,200, Freeman 64, Smith 56, Muncy 5K. But there's a lot of guys in this lineup that are cheap. Chris Taylor is only $3,200. Ahmed Rosario is only $3,900. Kike is only $3K. So it's a really easy team to you don't necessarily have to play the best hitters from this team if you wanted better pitching than, say, pairing Smiley and Gonsolin. But you can also use guys that still have upside like Chris Taylor and Kike to offset those salaries at the top and still end up with, good Dodger stacks. So I don't think they should be very difficult to get to. They are fourth in stack score because of being relatively expensive, but they're first in top stack percentage, first in ownership, basically neck and neck with the Mets and the Cubs, but they look very good here against theirs.
Drop roses. Did they go over San Diego and Rockies game already? No, it's not on the main slate. It's not on the early slate.
Thank God. Maybe I can win today.
That's I'm assuming, I think there's a 4:00. There's probably like a 2-game afternoon slate, but we're not covering that. The prize pools aren't as big. Anyway,
also, Cole Reagans was added to DraftKings. He's 6,600, and I don't really care.
Okay. Hey, follow Adam at Ship My Money DFS. Me at Laffy_D. Also, I threw it on Twitter. It's already up on YouTube on the Odd Shopper channel. Threw up a little how to win betting preseason football. If you're going to be betting preseason and watching it and doing any of that, we're going to have DFS shows. Matt Kajeski's got his DFS projections. I'm going to be breaking down the best betting spots for every game. Already got the how-to out there. So that's something to look forward to. Anyone tells you you're a degenerate for betting the preseason, they're wrong. It's just a different game, man. Just an information game, and we're here to tackle it. So appreciate you guys hanging out as always. Thanks to Mike for producing, and we'll see you back here tomorrow on the MLB Strategy Show.